Welcome to the Build a Life After Loss podcast, uplifting support for your grief and healing journey. We're here to encourage your hope in the future and strengthen your confidence so that you can build a life of purpose and joy. I'm your host, Julie Clough, certified grief coach. Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 116, Facing the Grief with Nikky Oswald. Life is not easy. We know that, don't we? And if we didn't know it before, we certainly learned that in 2020. Things changed a lot in a very little amount of time. In fact, I've thought recently about how unexpected all of that was and how we could have never if somebody had told us in 2019, this is what 2020 is going to look like, or this is what the beginning of 2021 is going to look like, we wouldn't have believed them. There are challenges all along the way. There are good days, there are bad days, but when we face what we're given, we invest our energy in learning about ourselves and learning about how to support ourselves in our difficulties. Life can be challenging and wonderful. Now, if you're in the middle of grief, wonderful may not be the adjective that you want to use right now, and I totally get it. It is hard. Grief is hard. But I love the interview I have for you today. I get to introduce you to my client, Nikky Oswald. I absolutely loved working with Nikky, as I do all my clients. Nikky is delightful. And in November 2019, she faced a heartache that no one would want to face. Today, she's going to tell her story about what happened, how we met, and what she decided to do next, and how that has made all the difference. Today on the podcast, Nikky shares her hard-earned wisdom. Here's the interview. I am so thrilled to have Nikky Oswald on the podcast today. She's going to tell us a little bit about her story and how we met and her experience working with me as well. So this is another client that I've worked with previously who I love dearly. And I wish you could see her cute face because she just looks so beautiful today.
Oh, thank you.
So, Nikky, welcome. Glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here and a little nervous, but I'm glad that you asked me to do this.
Yeah. We started talking about this a few months ago, just briefly, and you shared with me this past week some of your thought process that went on. So tell us a little bit about why you decided, you reached back out and said, yeah, I'm ready.
So I think you first asked me around Thanksgiving time, and my first initial reaction was no way. And I was talking to a friend about doing it, and she said, why wouldn't you say your story? Why wouldn't you try and help people? And so I started thinking more about it. And so I emailed you back and said yes. And then all the holidays happened and I never scheduled anything. And over Christmas, I kind of talked myself out of it again. And then I was listening to your podcast a few weeks ago with an interview, and I had this just overwhelming feeling, you need to do that. You need to schedule this. And so here we are.
Yeah, it's going to be such a blessing to people to hear your story, to hear the experiences that you've had, the things that you've learned. So I'm really grateful that you're here.
Thank you. I'm grateful too now.
Yeah. So just kind of give us a little background. Tell us about you, tell us about your family, and then kind of what happened.
Okay. So my husband, Zach, and we've been married almost 16 years in a couple weeks. And we have 3 boys. Our oldest is 11. Our middle son is 8, almost 9. And our third baby, that's what we'll be talking about more today. So on November 5th, 2019, I gave birth to my third son, Logan, and he was a perfectly formed 7-pound, 14-ounce little boy. But he was stillborn at 40 weeks. And the day before, so on the 4th of November, I had been scheduled for an induction. It was 2 days before my due date. I had that was a Monday morning. I had a doctor's appointment Friday. Everything was fine. He was moving. He was active on Sunday, the day before. But when I got to the hospital on the 4th, my nurse had a hard time finding the heartbeat. And within, I think it was about an hour after I got there, my doctor came in and confirmed that there wasn't a heartbeat anymore. So that was early in the morning on November 4th. He was born at like 4 a.m. on the 5th. So I spent 17 hours in labor. I knew that I would never take him home. What I didn't know was why. I had some minor complications through the pregnancy, but nothing like really alarming. I had been closely watched until about, I was closely watched the whole time. I was having ultrasounds very, very frequently until about 36 weeks. And then things like calmed down. All those minor complications went away. And so that's kind of when I let my guard down and I was like, everything's fine now. But it didn't have the outcome that I was expecting.
Yeah. Yeah. What was that like for the doctor to come in and tell you that? My goodness.
So it's interesting you ask that because I am a very nervous, anxious person when it comes to medical things. And so with my other two sons, when we were, ready to have the baby, I was like kind of a nervous wreck, right? And with Logan, I wasn't. That morning I woke up and I wasn't nervous. I had one thought. I woke up in the middle of the night and I remember thinking, I haven't felt him move. But I was so tired, I fell back asleep. And I woke up and I got to the hospital at 7 a.m. My nurse that was trying to find the heartbeat, she's actually a good friend of mine. She was like, when was the last time? And I was like, there's no way that there's not a heartbeat, basically. So I was very calm through all that. Thankfully, my husband had actually left. He dropped me off at the hospital and then he came home to take our other two boys to school. And he got back to the hospital 5 minutes before we found out. And it's really interesting, actually, to think back on that because my doctor is also a very close friend. And when she came in and she looked at the monitors and I just looked at her face, and that was the first time that I realized that something was actually wrong. And that might sound really just naive, but I think it was honestly a blessing to not be anxious about it. And I just looked at her face and I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "There's no heartbeat." And the next few moments were a blur, kind of in now. My husband, when she said that, was sitting in a chair behind her. And then she said that, and all of a sudden I wasn't laying down anymore. I was sitting up, and I remember just hysterically crying and pleading with God. I remember saying over and over, "Don't take my baby." And just asking him over and over not to do this, which I was already done. I knew that things couldn't change. And then I remember my husband holding me and saying, it'll be okay. But it didn't feel like it was going to be okay right then.
Yeah. A long time before it felt okay again, didn't it? Wasn't it?
Yeah. Yes.
Long time. Yeah. And then to face labor.
Yeah.
What a cruel irony.
Yes, that was a very hard decision. At that point, my doctor said we can go ahead and induce, or we can have a C-section. And, she left it up to me. And ultimately, I chose to be induced and to go through all that. But that was not my first initially, I just wanted it over with. Said I just wanted to be done and I wanted to go home. and I didn't want to live this nightmare anymore. But thankfully, my husband and my doctor were a little more level-headed about everything and were able to talk to me about all the process. And
did you have some time to make that decision, or did you feel like it was pretty quick?
No, they gave me a lot of time to think about that. Actually, one of the biggest miracles, there are so many miracles surrounding this situation, but one of the biggest ones was there was a nurse at the hospital who I didn't know. I had never met her. My husband knew who she was. And she had experienced a stillbirth 14 years prior. And so we live in a really small Montana rural town. And she walked into the room and I didn't know who she was, but I did, if that makes sense. So I didn't know her name, but I knew she was there because she had gone through the same thing. Mm-hmm. And so she was there and she was able to talk to me about it. And I believe it was about 8:00 in the morning. They told that we confirmed there wasn't a heartbeat. And I don't think they started the process of inducing me until 11 a.m. So I had quite some time to think about it.
Yeah. Did you say 11 a.m.?
Yeah, it was around 10 or 11, I believe.
Yeah. But, to try to make that decision, like you said, to be so, like, the grief is so consuming. It's just hard.
Yeah. And that's the nurse that came in. Her name's Kirsten. She just looked at me and said, you need some time to process all this. And I'm grateful that I listened and didn't, just because there's nothing wrong with, if I would have had to have a C-section, that's fine too. But it did help to have that time to process and the time to just grieve, I guess. And I wasn't, I was in shock. So to make a big decision like that when you're in shock is hard.
Yeah, for sure. And that so often is the case. When something hard happens, it's like, not only this hard thing has happened, but then there's decisions that have to be made. And that wasn't the first decisions that had to be made. So, what was it like then to go through labor, to deliver this beautiful baby that you, like you said, you weren't ever going to be able to bring home? What was it like telling your boys? What was it like, those days following?
Oh, geez. So I think that was probably one of the hardest things, was having to tell our other kids, our other boys. So my parents, it was hard to tell anyone. My parents were planning on coming up They live about 2 hours away. They were going to come up and take care of the boys. And like I said, the boys were at school. And so my parents weren't coming super early or anything. And I've never had a short labor, so we knew we had time. And I called my mom and I said, you need to come up just whenever you can and let her know. And my husband called his parents and said, if, you need to come up also, because this is basically the only time you're going to meet him. My parents went and picked the boys up from school. And I just, before they went, I told my parents, I said, don't tell them anything. I said, this has to come from us. And my mom says it was a miracle that they didn't ask. They picked the kids up from school and they knew. I mean, they were 10 and 7 at the time. They fully comprehended that they were going to meet their baby brother within the next day or so. And so they came to the hospital after school, and everyone left the room, and my husband and I just had to tell him, we said, he's not, he's still in my stomach, but he is not going to be alive when he comes out. Mm. And, it was, that kind of still gets to me. Our kids, they went into shock. My oldest, especially, it was really, really difficult. And, another really big miracle in all of this actually is we moved to this town a year and a half before I had Logan. So we hadn't been here very long. And the only person I knew before we moved here, and I didn't know her well before we moved. It's just somebody that I talked to a few times to kind of get to know the area. She had experienced she had experienced stillbirth also almost 2 years prior to the time I had Logan. And when we moved here, it had only been a few months that she experienced that. And so my kids, and this is the coincidences. I know I don't believe in coincidences. This is a total miracle. She has 2 older boys also that are good friends with mine. And so they knew, that this is a possibility. They had seen their friends kind of go through it. And I think that has been such a blessing in all of this, is to have close family friends that understand. Yeah. Not only for me and my husband, but their kids understand what's happening with my kids, and my kids understand, we both serve each other so much on those anniversary dates, and our kids get involved, and it's such a blessing.
Yeah, such a blessing. And it's God prepares us. And even though we'll never feel prepared, it's not like, it's not like we ever feel prepared, or we feel like, this is what happened. It's still incredibly devastating, but it's like these little rays of sunshine that God has, that shines down from heaven and says, we haven't forgotten you.
Yeah, exactly. And that was, I was grateful to know her, and to know that I had seen her, through her healing process a little bit. And so I guess just knowing, I knew when my doctor confirmed there wasn't a heartbeat, I knew my life was changed forever. Mm-hmm. And at that moment, I had no idea how I was going to move forward, but I knew I could because I had witnessed her moving forward. And I'm just so incredibly grateful for that.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not left completely in the dark. You're left with that ray of hope that there's something more ahead.
Yeah. Yeah.
Boy, in the middle of it, it just doesn't feel that way, does it?
No, no. In the middle of it just feels awful.
Yeah. How did you cope in those first few months?
So those first few months, so talking about the two women that I knew that went through similar experiences, they helped me a lot. Both of them, I'm very grateful that I had not only one person, but two people that were very in different parts of their grief journey to kind of look to, I guess. Mm-hmm. So I coped a lot by talking with them. And I write in my journal a lot. And so I did that. It was probably, I think it was around January. So the end of January. So just a few months after that my friend told me about your podcast. Mm-hmm. And I remember the first time I ever listened to the podcast was my younger son. My husband had to take him to the emergency room because he had a really bad case of the flu. Mm-hmm. And I did not know. I realized right then and there, I didn't know how to deal with any extra stress. Mm-hmm. Because it just, any extra stress seemed to just send me over the edge. Mm-hmm. And there seemed to be a lot of it within a month of each other. My younger son, I said, had, a really bad case of the flu. My older son broke his wrist playing basketball, and I didn't know how to deal with that. And so I think I listened to like the first 5 episodes of your podcast all in one day, and I just sat and took notes. And so many things that you said just really resonated with me. And especially how you talked about how your thoughts create your emotions, and your emotions create your actions. I'd never really thought about that, but I knew that I wasn't having good thoughts or helpful thoughts that were helping me heal. I was having a lot of conflicting emotions, a lot of emotions that I had never, we talk about emotions. We talk about being happy, sad, mad, stressed, that's it. Mm-hmm. Like those are the, main emotions. And I was feeling so many emotions all the time, and I did not know how to process them. Mm-hmm. And I realized listening to the podcast that my thoughts were creating all these emotions. And of course, in those early months of grief, I think that's just to be expected. Really.
Right. For sure.
Yeah. And, but I didn't realize how detrimental those thoughts were. How do I say that? How detrimental those thoughts were having an effect on me, I guess, is, I felt I felt bipolar a lot of the time. I felt like I was feeling so many conflicting emotions. And then I felt so much guilt. Mm. And I think that was one of the biggest things when we were working together, is all this guilt that had just like built up inside me, and I didn't know how to release it. And then I would feel guilt on feeling the guilt, right? Like you have these emotions where I would feel angry, about the situation, and then I would feel guilty for feeling angry. And it was just this vicious cycle of all these emotions. And And people, when I tell people that I felt guilt, they sometimes they look at me like, why would you feel guilty? You didn't do anything wrong. And I felt guilt for not being able to keep him alive, of course, but I also felt guilt for things that weren't just on the surface for everyone to see, right? I felt guilt for not showing up for my kids my other kids, the way that I had. I felt guilt for feeling all these other conflicting emotions. And and then I would feel, honestly, Julie, I felt guilty at times for being grateful to be able to sleep through the night and not having a newborn waking me up.
I remember talking about that. Yeah.
And really, I just, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I was saying I'm grateful he's not here, because that's not what I mean by that at all. Yeah.
There's just so much. It's just so much. And we're just bombarded in grief. We're just bombarded and we don't know what to do with it. So, your explanation of how like stress was hard because your bucket of stress is overflowing already. Mm-hmm. And then something else gets added to it. There's no place for it. Mm-hmm. And so it just becomes compounded, and then all the emotions, and then we pile on heavier and heavier emotions on top of the heavier emotions because of the thoughts that are created by the heavy emotions, and not understanding grief. Like we don't, I was explaining to somebody I think it was just yesterday, I said, grief is like being thrown into the middle of the lake and you never learned how to swim.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely
really have no idea how to deal with it.
You don't. There's no right or wrong ways to deal with it. And I feel like right now as a society, we put a lot of emphasis on just be happy, be, good vibes and all these things. And we're not meant to come to this earth and experience just happiness.
Right.
We are meant to experience a big range of emotions, but we're not taught how to deal with those or how to process them. And I honestly, I had no idea how to work through it. And there were so many times I remember talking to my friend and I was like, maybe I should make that call and do the discovery call. But I was like, I don't think I've been grieving long enough. Mm. And which just sounds so silly to me now, like, let me be miserable longer, even though I knew what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting to think about that.
What made you think that you hadn't grieved longer? Because I think that's you haven't grieved long enough. Because I think that's a common feeling. Like, I'm not far enough ahead. I'm not at the place yet where this could be useful to me. I think that's pretty common that people think that.
I think just looking at, just watching other people grieve, I guess, for other things that they've gone through. And I don't know. I just really, for some reason, I just thought my initial plan was to make that discovery call in the fall. Mm-hmm. I was like, when, because this happened November 2019, right? We all know what happened in March of 2020. The whole world went crazy. Mm-hmm. And so my kids were home and then it was summer and I was thinking when they go back to school in the fall is when I'll do it. And great. I'm thankful that I didn't wait. I remember I can't remember what episode, but I was listening to one of your podcasts and I was walking around the neighborhood and I was like, I need to just make this call. I need to do this. And that was around the end of May. Mm-hmm. And the last thing I wanted to do in the summer was grieve, but I'm so glad I did because as you know now, like I am homeschooling my kids this year. And not saying I don't have the time to do it, because I do put forth the time still. But I'm thankful that I had those tools in place before I had more stress put on me.
Yeah.
Right, of their education, I guess.
Yeah. Before you jumped into the deep end of the pool.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love that you shared that, because I think that it's so common for us to feel like in order to move forward, we have to already be at a certain place. But what did you find? Like, as we started to work together, what did you discover in that process that helped you feel better about that decision to just go ahead and get started?
Yeah, I think when we first started working together, I tried to like convince myself and you that I was okay, right? that I wasn't really that bad off, right? That most days I was fine. Mm-hmm. But as we worked together, I remember, let me back up just a minute. But, I had listened to your podcast for a few months, and I remember talking to my friend, about you, because she was the one that had told me about you. And I said, well, I don't really, I feel like the podcast is helping me enough. And she said, well, that might be true, but the coaching is more kind of based on your individual needs. And so she's like, but it's up to you really what you want to do. She wasn't like, you need to do this or anything. And so, anyway, that's what I found, was that, yes, the podcast helped the start, helped me to start recognizing my thoughts and start recognizing things that I needed to do and differently and things. But the coaching was based on what I was going through as an individual. And it made me set aside time every week to deal with it. Yeah. We talked every week, and I knew, we had that scheduled meeting time, and I knew it was coming. And then not only that, there were assignments to do, during our calls. And so it really made me face the grief instead of trying to just avoid it. Yeah. I feel like sometimes when we grieve, we do everything we can to stay as busy as we can, so we just don't think about it. Mm-hmm. And I did that for a few months. I'll be honest, I did that. But it doesn't work. It always blew up in my face. And it's just like, I love what you always say about how time, people say time heals your wounds, and time doesn't heal those wounds unless you put forth effort to heal. Mm-hmm. And that's what I found to be really true with my situation.
Yeah. So, how do you feel? And maybe this is a little bit of an unfair question, because we don't know for sure, but I imagine that you have some thoughts and feelings about where you would be right now if you hadn't made that phone call versus where you are now. Tell me a little bit about what your thoughts are on that.
So I know if I wouldn't have made that phone call and chosen to do the program, I still wouldn't know how to deal with the extra stress. I know that because there were times even when we were working together where it was always things that happened to my kids. My two other kids, if they got hurt, it put me just over the top. I couldn't deal with it. And I think we were working together, and my oldest son had a 4-wheeling accident, and it wasn't even that bad. It wasn't great, but it wasn't horrible, but it just sent me, to that place. And, this 2020 and this year have been stressful so far, but I feel like I know how to deal with it now.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that I never that I am always calm or anything like that, but I know.
I'm not either.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, this isn't like you do it a few times and you're healed, right?
Yeah.
I know that there are still days I feel just really sad, but I wouldn't say they last all day anymore. And that's before we started working together. I would have just bad days. And now it's just, I feel like if I get sad about Logan not being here, it lasts, I would call it more of a moment, maybe a couple hours or so, but I can come out of it now.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. So, what are a couple of things that you feel like have really helped you? What are some tools or some thoughts, or just what are some things that have really helped you, either through this process of coaching with me or the things that you learned in that process?
So the biggest things that have helped me, music has played a really big role in my healing. I've always liked music, but now it's different. The music I listen to now is different, I guess. It's more calming or helpful. Of course, when I'm cleaning, it's still upbeat, but there's a time and a place, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so music, and then when I get to those times where I feel like I can't process, or I feel like I need to process emotions, but I don't necessarily want, I guess, people to know, I guess, is, because we all have these thoughts that are like, why would I think this? If somebody knew I was thinking this, they would think I am a terrible person. And so you taught me this, but I will write it down. And usually I write it very angrily or however I'm feeling, right? And I'll either rip up the paper, or we have a wood burning stove in our house and I'll throw it into the fire, which is a lot more, I like doing that better than ripping it.
Clears the air, right?
Yes. Yeah. And really, it really just helps me release those thoughts and those emotions. Some other things that I have started doing. So when we were working together, you were telling me, do deep breathing. And I was like, I think that was the first assignment you gave me. And I was like, this is so ridiculous. But oh my goodness, it is so helpful. And I realize that I don't take deep breaths enough. And I find myself now, my kids laugh at me because they know when I'm stressed because all of a sudden they'll look over and I'm doing deep breathing. And I've taught them, I'm like, you need to deep breathe with me if you're feeling anxious about something, or I've even had them do the writing and ripping or throw it into the fire. And because like we said, I just think they need to learn how to process this. I don't want them to grow up and be so in the dark like I was, I guess. And so that kind of has turned in, I do meditation every day. Mm-hmm. And I'm a scheduled person to a point. My husband would laugh at that. But I have a schedule of I wake up at the same time, or my alarm goes off at the same time. I get out of bed generally around the same time. And I have my morning routine. I get up, and before anything else, I am, saying prayers, and I do like a daily devotional scripture study, and then I go and I exercise, and that has helped me immensely just to have that routine. And then during the day, it's kind of, I don't really have a routine, but that morning routine, if I miss it, it kind of throws me off all day.
Well, wonderful. I just, I loved working with you. I knew that you had beautiful things to share and that you would be a blessing to other people who would hear your story. And so I'm super grateful that you took this time to share your experience. You know, your friend had told you, yeah, you can listen to the podcast, but it's way different when you get the personalized version. Was she right?
Yes. Yes, very much so. And I realized that while we were working together, when my thoughts started changing and I started becoming a lot more kinder to myself. I allowed myself to just show up how you would always say that, just show up however you need to show up, because I think that's a hard thing with grief also, is there comes a time where you feel like, okay, it's been long enough. And I'm not saying other people expected things of me, but I put that in my head that I should be able to show up in a certain way. And sometimes I couldn't. And I realized that was okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a beautiful thing, because boy, like, if being kind to ourselves is where all kindness begins.
Yeah. Yes, it's true. It's very true.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Any last thoughts you'd like to share with us? I've loved what you shared today, and I'm so grateful.
I think just the main, I guess, at the last thing is kind of touched on this. I mean, I still have, those moments of sadness, and
it's still so recent.
Yeah, I mean, it's barely been over a year. But it doesn't affect my everyday life anymore. And I just think, I am, as much as I wish that I could raise Logan here on earth, I know that no matter what, I'm his mom. And I believe that I'll be able to raise him someday. And I also, it's taken a while to get to this point. And sometimes I don't feel this way, but most of the time I do. I know he's exactly where he's supposed to be, which seems awful and sounds weird. But I know that his whole mission was just to gain that body and then return back, and that he wasn't ever really supposed to live this life with us on the earth. And I'm grateful for that knowledge, and I'm grateful that he still came.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that he's mine, and I'm grateful for the lessons I've learned through all this whole experience, even though it's just been heartbreaking. I mentioned that music was a big thing for me. I don't know if you've probably heard the song by Hillary Weeks called Beautiful Heartbreak. A good friend of mine sent it to me after I had Logan. And just real quick, in the beginning of the song, she says, she had her plan, her life mapped out in front of her. She knew she had her plan set out, and all of a sudden there was a mountain in the middle of her road, and she didn't know how to go around it. She realized that she had to go over it. And the chorus, I wrote down these lyrics the other day, and I just want to read. The chorus says, "Every fear, every doubt, all the pain I went through was the price that I paid to see this view. And now that I'm here, I would never trade the grace that I feel and the faith that I find through the bittersweet tears and the sleepless nights. I used to pray that he'd take it all away, but instead it became a beautiful heartbreak." Wow. And I think that is, I can't say it better, but that's truly how I feel. That in the beginning, like I said, I was just praying to God to not do this. but that wasn't the plan. And I don't know why. I don't know why I don't get to raise him, but I'm grateful for the lessons, and I'm grateful that he is still my son. Yeah. And I'm grateful for all of the miracles that happened throughout this whole experience.
Yeah. That is some beautiful, beautiful acceptance that you have worked hard to earn.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. It's, I know the effort, I know the work that you put in to showing up for yourself, and showing up for your grief, showing up for your boys and your family, and, just doing everything that you could to help yourself so that, like you said, you're in a position now where you're able to be there for your boys and homeschool them. And, that might, I don't know, I don't know if you would have felt strong enough.
Oh, I definitely wouldn't have. I know that. So I'm grateful to you for being able to help me through this process and for doing what you do. I think it's a miracle in itself how, my friend knew of you and knew of your podcast, had worked with you and told me about you. And really, you started that podcast not long before I had Logan. So I'm grateful that you listened to that prompting to do your work.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's a blessing when I get to meet such wonderful people like you and those that are listening in. It's a blessing. So thank you. Thanks for being here, Nikky.
Thank you, Julie.
Nikky is wonderful, and I thoroughly enjoyed this opportunity to interview her. I know her story is a blessing to her and to others. She shared a real story of pain and happiness, and I love how real and honest she is. Life can be hard sometimes, and that we can triumph over the hard. Your life doesn't have to be perfect. We can have all the emotions and enjoy life again too. If you've been putting off scheduling your free discovery call like Nikky was tempted to do, then now is the time to schedule. Grief is hard. It's messy. I know how hard and complicated it feels. I know how hard it is to pull yourself through on your own. It's impossible. I've been there. I almost lost myself completely to the pain of grief. And that's why I'm here, because I couldn't overcome my grief on my own. And I know how comforting it is to have someone in your corner who has been where you are. I've been there. I don't teach and coach from theory alone. I teach and coach from experience. I'm in your corner. I'm here to help. Schedule your free discovery call today. It's super easy. Go to buildalifeafterloss.com/talk. Click the button. You'll see some times available there. Choose one and we'll talk at that time. It's that easy. I'll call you. All right. You have a beautiful week. Remember, I believe in you. Love you.